There are a lot of games out there, truly billions. I assume I haven't counted them all. But unfortunately not all of them can be winners. And today we're going to go through 10 games that most would say flopped and rank them on a scale of too far gone to redeemed. We're going to kick things off with Anthem from BioWare, one that was, I wouldn't say super hyped on release, but definitely wasn't super hyped post-release. Now this was launched in February of 2019. It was an online multiplayer action game, very different from BioWare's usual run of single-player narrative experiences, and a lot of fans were kind of disappointed that we weren't going to be getting something in that realm of like Dragon Age or Mass Effect, which were two of the biggest series at the time. Now internally there was a lot going on in BioWare Edmonton, with Casey Hudson, who was leading the charge, leaving in 2014, and unfortunately Mass Effect Andromeda came out in 2017 to some less than stellar reviews, so there was a lot of anticipation on Anthem doing very well for EA. Unfortunately, upon release it was heavily criticized for its lack of polish and its really dull, repetitive story and missions. Praised for its combat though, so that's something. Unfortunately, even though there was plans to try and reinvent the gameplay to make it more energetic and exciting for players, in the end, future development was called off in 2021 and the servers were shut down. So as far as flops go, I think it's pretty hard to come back from the literal dead. So I'm gonna pop Anthem in too far gone. Next up, we have Assassin's Creed Unity, which I personally, little old fool that I was in 2014, was really hyped for. It was another part of the yearly installment of the Assassin's Creed franchise. It was set in the French Revolution, and Lorde was singing the cover for it. It sounded and looked really cool. Unfortunately, even before the game came out, there was some controversy around its online multiplayer function, which was a fairly new feature to the Assassin's Creed series. The controversy stemmed from a lack of female avatars in the online multiplayer section. Now, that necessarily wouldn't be the be-all and end-all, but it was Ubisoft's response to the backlash that did ruffle a few feathers. In an article to Polygon, the creative director, Alex Amenico, stated that ultimately the decision came down to the reality of production. Adding a female protagonist would be double the animation, double the voices, and double the visual assets, which was pretty hotly debated that was actually a big thing for a studio the size of Ubisoft to undertake. I'll also say they stated they were excited to introduce us to the female characters of Assassin's Creed Unity, and then the one, main character that was female they had, Elise, who was Arno's love interest, dies in the stupidest way possible. So it's not great is what I'm saying. In terms of release though, initially it was quite rocky, with a lot of reviewers and players talking about performance issues, online connectivity issues, and some particularly game-breaking bugs. Insert the horror story here. Those eyes will literally never leave me. In response to player feedback, Ubisoft was pretty on top of the ball, not that they had much of a choice, and they ended up suspending the sale of the Unity Season Pass as well as the Gold Edition, and compensating players with the DLC Dead Kings for free, as well as compensating people who had already chucked up the money for the Season Pass with free digital copies of 6 Ubisoft titles, funnily enough, including Black Flag, an arguably better game. I do like that they went, sorry for our less than stellar Assassin's Creed game, here's an arguably better Assassin's Creed game, maybe you'll forget about it. I think generally though, Unity is still held quite dear to those who really adore the time period and adore the series. Me personally, I played it once, I never played it again. So as far as flops go, I'm gonna pop this one in nah. Cyberpunk 2077. It is hard to overstate the amount of hype this game got. It's equally hard to overstate the amount of flop it went through on its initial release. Now, I love Cyberpunk now, but when it first came out, it was plagued with bugs. A lot of critics and players were reporting issues like connectivity problems, performance issues, particularly on the PS4 and Xbox One versions, and some pretty game-breaking crashes, including myself, who could only play through the first maybe hour before the system shut down entirely. Now, in response to this, CD Projekt Red did offer up refunds for affected players who just weren't happy with the game, but they did continue working on it, adding new updates and patches to hopefully fix and get out the game they wanted to make. What I think really launched the game back into public consciousness and won its favor back, at least for me, was the 2.0 update and the Phantom Liberty DLC. The DLC, obviously, amazing. I cried. On the floor, in tears. But the real kicker was the 2.0 update, which added in new things like improved weapon and vehicle handling, changed the in-game UI to look way better, and finally fixed that really confusing skill tree. I'd say now you'd be hard-pressed to find someone who hasn't heard about Cyberpunk 2077 and its incredible redemption arc. At least for me, it well and truly redeemed itself. I'm in love with this game, I will never stop frothing about it. So, I think it's only fair we pop this one in redeemed. Mass Effect Andromeda. Okay, look, I'll fully admit I was one of the people that was hyping this up to the max. I'm a massive Mass Effect fan. Naturally, I had to support my baby. I love it. It's exciting. Unfortunately, didn't have the best launch. So Mass Effect Andromeda came out in 2017 in March. Now this was the 4th installment in the Mass Effect franchise, but moving away from the trilogy that was Shepard. That already was a massive thing for a lot of fans who wanted to see the continuation of the story they'd worked so hard on, especially after the less than stellar reception of the 3rd game's ending. But this would be a whole new project. Would it deliver? Yes and no. I challenge you, it's not as bad as you remember it being. I think. So internally, much like Anthem, this one had a very rocky production with a lot of BioWare staff coming and going and leaving, project hands changing, which led to a lot of miscommunication and some less than stellar management from EA, in my opinion. I have to say that for legal reasons. Now, this hesitation wasn't helped when a gameplay reveal did show some not so great looking character animations and some odd facial features, but it wasn't anything, too egregious. That was until the game was released. Now, it was reviewed on the mostly average to lower negative scale, with critics praising its combat but criticizing its story. Personally, I didn't think it was that bad. I had a lot of fun with the new companions, I liked where the story went, I enjoyed Ryder as a protagonist. Will it ever be the trilogy for me? No, but it doesn't have to be, and it shouldn't have been. As far as rankings go, it's not too far gone. I wouldn't say it's redeemed, but it's fine, I guess. So it's fine, I guess. No Man's Sky. Okay, if you ever went to a nondescript gaming store and got pitched this by an excited redhead, I'm so sorry, that was me. I was hyping this game up to the maximum. I was so excited. I was captivated by its promise of an open world, procedurally generated planets. That's sick. That's my jam. I love me some space. And clearly so did a lot of other people. Fans flocked to this for its revolutionary take on an open world system. But as we often see, hype is a good thing. Overhype often leads to disappointment, and unfortunately on release, No Man's Sky just didn't live up to expectations. A lot of reviews came back criticizing the emptiness of this procedurally generated world, saying it felt sparse and inactive, while others were a little bit more ticked off at the devs themselves for promising things they couldn't deliver, like fully functioning multiplayer, and the lack of communication between devs and fans was something that created quite a bit of hostility, which the devs at Hello Games openly admitted and apologized for. Post-release though, they continued working on updates and patches to bring this game to life, adding things like a ton of narrative, new game modes, better base support, and better multiplayer functions to really create that online community. As far as game redemptions go, there are few that compare to No Man's Skies. It's pretty incredible what they managed to do. The game now is completely unrecognizable to what was first released, and honestly, I'm real grateful for it. I love No Man's Sky, and I'm so glad I can kind of say I was sort of a bit right, if you squint really hard. And at about 4 years. So I'm well and truly putting No Man's Sky in the redeemed category. Evolve was a game I feel like I heard a lot about pre-release and then crickets once it came out. I was working at Nondescript Gaming Store when this came out, and the amount of marketing and promotion we got was insane, but I could not tell you a thing about the game now. The whole idea of Evolve was a 4v1 first-person shooter. Now this came out in February of 2015, and there was a decent amount of hype. People were interested at this dark, gritty hunter game where you get to play as a monster and hunt your friends. That sounds sick. Upon release though, there was a lot of criticism over the samey looking maps, grindy, repetitive gameplay, and frankly, the slog of a progression system. Now, Totorock did try very hard to keep the game alive, but unfortunately all these issues did eventually quash the player base. There was a spark of hope when it went to a free-to-play model called Evolve Stage 2, but ultimately those servers were shut down in 2018. So, sorry Evolve. Didn't quite make it through. There's a joke in there about evolving to be better, but I can't think of it right now. Let me know in the comments. It's hard to come back from your servers being literally shut down, so unfortunately I gotta pop this one in Too Far Gone. Now, Spore is an interesting one because I feel like it's followed me my entire life, but I've never actually gotten to play it myself. Initially announced in 2005, this was massively hyped for the idea that you could grow a tiny little cell into a spacefaring civilization. That's sick. I love that. It's like The Sims, but bigger. But this was also a very ambitious project, which obviously built up hype, but also pushed out the production time, eventually having delayed until 2008. Now, upon release, there were mixed reviews. A lot of people liked the creature creation feature, but also criticized the game for being a bit too slow and simple, with not a lot of meat on the bones. Going forward though, Spore did get a few expansions, like the Galactic Adventures, sick name, and Creepy and Cute Parts Pack, confusing name, which went on to add more customization and more features for players to get involved in. Now, this didn't really change the reviews that much, but it did support the existing player base. What Spore did really well was garner and nurture a community with its community-driven content, and I think that's what's really kept it alive up to now. So in terms of floppitude, I'd say this is probably the median, so I'm gonna pop Spore in there. There's a very easy joke to make about Duke Nukem Forever's development time, taking forever to make, 14 years to be exact. Development went through a lot of internal and external struggles. Internally, there were a lot of engine changes and a lot of decisions that kind of went back and forth on what the game would actually look like. Eventually though, it did get done in its 3D, I won't say glory, but it got done. I really do think that 14 years put a massive weight on the game itself, both from an expectation standpoint and from a technology standpoint, because a lot of reviews criticized it for clunky mechanics, bad graphics, old jokes, long and tedious load times, and some boring gameplay, which is kind of hard to come back from. Now, to their credit, they did release the DLC called The Doctor Who Cloned Me, but that didn't really do much to win back audience favor, unfortunately, which will put Duke Nukem quite firmly in the too far gone. I couldn't think of a joke here, but neither could Duke Nukem, so. Fallout 76 was an interesting one as someone who was really into the Fallout series and really grew attached to the isolation and the loneliness that comes from playing a single-player Fallout game. I personally wasn't the biggest fan of the pivot into the online multiplayer form, but there was a decent chunk of the Fallout community who was really hyped for it. But to say that it had a swimming release would be to lie, because unfortunately Fallout 76 did come under a lot of scrutiny for its bugs, game-breaking glitches, connectivity issues, and a lack of interactivity in the world around you. One of the best parts about Fallout was the NPCs you met along the way, getting to travel with them, learn their stories, throw them at super mutants. It was really fun, and to not have that felt like a massive step backwards. But Bethesda were obviously not keen to let this big project die a cold death, and went on to release a bunch of updates and patches to build up the game. Big updates like the Wastelanders update added NPCs and a new main questline. They also added Nuclear Winter, which was a battle royale mode, and Fallout Worlds with customizable worlds, which I think is really cool, and I spent arguably more time building than I did doing anything else. Ultimately, these updates serve to make the game better over time, and it's still doing pretty well to date. Is Fallout 76 my kind of game? Not particularly, but I can definitely recognize the hard work that went into revitalizing it to make it what it is today, so I'm gonna pop that one in redeemed. Star Wars Battlefront 2 really felt like the band-aid that was meant to fix the issues of the first game. Did it succeed? Sorta? Kinda? Not really. They did try to win over fans by adding in a bunch of characters and weapons from the original trilogy, but ultimately it couldn't outrun the perception that it was a pay-to-win game, something I'm really against, and clearly a lot of other people were too, because its reviews were pretty staunchly negative. In response to the backlash, EA did try to pull back on the microtransactions and rejig the progression system, but ultimately it's kind of hard to tell how much that really affected the player base's general mentality. I rarely, if ever, hear anything about Star Wars Battlefront 2, and even less in the positive, so I'm gonna pop this one in nah. It's got a player base, but So that is my tier list on flopped games and their level of floppitude. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Did I miss some? Let me know what you think down in the comments. And make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell to get more of this, and this, and this.